Command the Mic podcast brought to you by Full Press Coverage. Let's get it on. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us on this lovely Thursday afternoon. I'm here with two guys I highly respect. First of all, I'm going to introduce Rick Snider from 106.7 The Fan. How you doing today, Rick?
Super. Always glad to be on these.
Thank you. I appreciate you being on here. I'm also joined by Big Doug from the Big Douglas Show. He also has a new series called Draft on Tap. How you doing today, Doug?
Excellent. Thank you, buddy.
Of course, been glad to have you guys. So I was talking to Rick offline earlier about this. It's just like the Washington, D.C., it's very hard to find news to talk about, right? This has been a kind of a light week in the D.C. area, and now we're going to kind of talk about it and bring it here. And I just love having Rick on because he has such a collective understanding of the Washington, D.C. area and the whole ownership thing. So we're definitely going to dive into Dan Snyder today. We're going to talk about the stadium relocation as well, potentially. But we'll start off with something kind of light and easy. And it was a great question that Doug put on his Twitter feed today. And, Rick, you know more about football than I would ever forget. So here we go right here. Let's bring it up. How would you rank these four wide receivers? So basically, the four wide receivers from Washington, we have Art Monk, Santana Moss, Charlie Taylor, and Terry McLaurin. How would you rank them one through four in your opinion?
Doug, where is Gary Clark?
That's what everyone keeps saying that. Everyone keeps saying that.
It's Gary Clark.
I'm glad to be able to comment on this before you go ahead with your rankings, Rick, because I do one of these every day. These are not my four. These would not be my top four in the history of the franchise. What I try to do each day is pick a couple of guys from a position group that I think will spurn like some discussion and include everybody. Rick, if we didn't include guys like Tana and Terry, who would the young guys pick? I got so many times, like, who is 42? So, a lot of these guys don't even know that far back in the history. So if this question today had some of the new jacks go and Google some of these guys, like, that's kind of what it's all about, right? So for anybody that are doing these with me daily, first of all, I appreciate it. They are never usually my top four. The question literally states, how do you rank them personally?
Okay. Hey, don't feel bad. Michael Westbrook didn't know who Charlie Taylor was when he met him either. So he literally did not know. And Sam Huff came over and told him. It was kind of a wild one. All right. Because I think Gary Clark's better than Art Monk. So that's why I brought that up.
People are saying that.
And Gary Clark had, USFL catches too. To me, it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame, not the NFL Hall of Fame. And you shouldn't discount USFL stats, and Gary should be in. But that said, okay, I'm going to go Charlie Taylor, Art Monk, Santana, and then Terry. It's close, though.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I'm just kind of curious about this because you have a good take on it. Why would you put Art Monk over Gary Clark? I feel like Art Monk was more of the possession, more of the clutch wide receiver, but Gary Clark was more dynamic and explosive. Is that kind of the deal breaker for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Clark combined had 700 catches if you had his USFL time in. So, and I just thought he was a bigger playmaker than Art. Art had all the catches and stats, and you can't deny that Art was a great player. I just think Gary was better.
Makes sense.
It was incredible. Do you remember, George, were you on the episode with me when we had Santana Moss on? And I think you were. And he told us that he had never played in the slot until he got with when the Shanahans came to Washington. It was the first time in his professional career he had ever played in the slot. And he had basically never played outside of the slot until he got to the NFL. So I always thought that was interesting. Like, it's so incredible, the difference about being used right and how that affects your overall career. We know how that goes.
100%. And Santana Moss actually got a University of Miami track scholarship to play in college. He actually had to walk on the football team, which I found was super impressive as well. So definitely stands out. So, obviously we don't want to talk about the glory days of Washington. I wish we could, but we kind of have to pivot a little bit to what's currently going on. Rick, this has been a crazy week. spearheaded by Don Van Natta's ESPN investigative reporting about this whole, Dan Snyder's, potential financial improprieties and things of that nature, a illegal loan for $55 million. How serious is that in your opinion, Rick? Do you find that like this code red for Mr. Snyder? How do you feel about this? What's your overall take?
And rich people don't go to jail very often. Though I shouldn't say that anymore because some of Trump's boys did.
That's true.
He didn't even pardon them. So, one of those things. But I don't think that's going to be the dagger. I mean, Dan Snyder got a little cocky maybe there for a moment. Kime's calling me. Can you believe that?
That's funny.
Yeah, turn him off. But
tell him to hop in.
You tell him to jump on in.
Yeah, tell him. I'll put him in the show. Okay, so what were we talking about?
Was that a dagger for Dan Snyder with this whole report dropping?
Snyder got a little cocky about, maybe I won't sell at these prices for a moment. And the NFL just came back and slapped him across the face with these stories. Not that they like that story getting out, but they got other ones in Mary J. White and all that. It's like, don't forget, when we showed you this back in November, you said, okay, I'll sell. You get a little arrogant. Okay, we still got this stuff. So, it's going to happen. And I just think the 55 million, that's an interesting part. And I know, politicians love nothing better than an AG wanting to be somebody like the mayor saying, I'm going to bring criminal indictments. But how often does that really happen? If you go away, take your billions, go to England, nobody's going to pursue you over these charges. So that part's not it. I had heard about the $1 billion in debt maybe a couple of months ago. And I didn't talk about it just because I don't even know if that's all of it. That's just what I know about. I think there could be more. Sure. Why wouldn't there on there? So his money troubles and his inability to get a stadium built is what's making this happen. Because the other NFL owners, they don't care about all this other allegation stuff. They're saying this dude's costing us a lot of money and controversy. It's time to move on. Because they can't get a stadium. And Bezos can get a stadium. Josh Harris can get a stadium. And I really like this Tillman for Fertitta. I've watched him before. He's a pretty impressive guy.
Okay.
All these guys can do things Snyder can no longer do because of his toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, how long? Just real quick, how long does it take? I appreciate this kind of from you. How long does it take to put that kind of story together as a writer?
Good question.
Well, it's kind of one of those evolving processes. I mean, it's not like I hear, he's $1 billion in debt. Let me hit the keyboard. Boom. You got to be careful with these stories. You got to be really careful.
Well, for like a guy like Van Natta, when they put together this 2,000, 5,000 piece, project, it's just like how long? Like, what kind of work does that entail? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Just the lawyers fact checking on you will be hours and hours of work,
right?
If not days, because you got to be careful. And some of it is things that you hear along the way, so you're constantly working on it, and finally got the whole pieces together. It wouldn't surprise me if you spent 80, 100 hours on that story, in the end. I mean, these things take forever. They're nerve-wracking as hell. I covered the last sale back in '99, and I can tell you every day for about 3 months, it was like I was being encircled by a half dozen guys yelling at me that everyone else was lying to them, and they were telling the truth. And the scary part was who was telling the truth changed every day. Every day. And they didn't care if they burned your reputation and made, suckered you into doing lies. They didn't care about that at all. You had to be really careful. I managed to escape intact. I won that battle against the Post and got a national rep out of it. But it was everything I had to do it.
And that's actually pretty interesting too, Rick, to kind of go with that regard. So in regard to libel, does the ESPN and Washington Post typically protect their writers for this kind of story, or how does that work out?
Yeah, I mean, when you get into these kind of things, especially with a guy like Dan Snyder who wants to drop a lawsuit on you, you have lawyers who are fact-checking on things, and it's kind of maddening at times, and they want to know who your sources are. And, I was in a difficult spot too. I was at the Washington Times then for the last sale. The way the shield law works is I can protect sources, but if I tell my editors who it is, they are not protected under law and are compelled to say it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you lose this kind of thing, you bust your career. And I was really afraid, they would say, who is it? I said, I can't tell you. And they were like, you either trust me to be right until I'm wrong, or we can't do this. And then when it was all over, Milstein wanted to start suing everybody, got thrown out of court first day. But I had to circle with lawyers and say, I'm not giving anything up. I don't know it's easier for you to have me give it up, but I'm not. I'll go to the jail if I have to and sit there. I didn't want to. I sure didn't want to sit in DC's jail. But your career is on the line there. And you either, if you give it up, you're dead. You might as well go sell ice cream.
100%.
So this is a high wire act when you're covering stories like this.
And Rick, you brought up a good point. So I don't know how much you even know about this, so maybe offhand. I found it kind of interesting that a day or two after that whole bravado and Dan Snyder potentially not selling the team, there was a hammer that came down from the NFL and all these documents started coming out. That isn't by coincidence, but in your opinion, right? Like, did you feel like the NFL has things in their back pocket, or how do you feel about this?
Yeah, the NFL has, everybody's got relationships, and including, it's weird that some of these stories are coming out of the New York Post on Snyder's kind of behalf. Yeah. Snyder always talks to New York media, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, which used to be his old partner, Fred Drasner's paper. They're not the same dog in the fight as we are here. They can throw stuff from afar and not suffer the consequences of looking like a house organ that we can do here. So I always found that pretty interesting, at what's going on there. Snyder doesn't have a friendly media in Washington because he's treated us like dogs all this year. Ain't nobody your friend here. Certainly not me. So the greatest part of this, getting him out of here, is my name will no longer be a curse word in town. That's kind of nice. That's
so funny. So yeah, going to that point. So Dan Snyder's been with the organization for about 23, 24 years. What are your impressions of him? I kind of am reading between the lines by your verbiage, but has there been any interactions where you've kind of felt, maligned by him, or has he been kind to you? I have no idea. How's it been interacting with Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, I had a heart attack at Redskin Park in 2002, and I was in the lobby, and it was just going bad. And I finally got, the trainers came up and saved my life. I had a lot of flashbacks with that Buffalo player, trainers on you. And Dan Snyder was in the lobby, making jokes about me dying. That's what my friends told me. So that's the kind of guy, when he first got the team, I had a cell number. We're in Atlanta. They're approved. Snyder and I had been talking during the sales process at times and back channels. And he comes over to me and says, hey, and he said, here's my cell number. Call me anytime. We actually did for a little while until he got mad. And I was into that. But I asked him then, I said, do you consider yourself a guardian of the game and a protector of the public trust owning this team? He said, absolutely. Yeah, I guess he stumbled on the last part of saying not, because he's been anything but a guardian of the game and a protector of the public trust. He's treated fans like ATMs. That's all he cares about. And it's a shame, because it didn't have to be that way. But in his first time he spoke to the players in the big meeting hall, he said, I'm a bit of a blank, 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 trying to say, I'm a tough guy like you, And they just laughed at him. Who is this guy? And he won't, he's really an introvert. I think a lot of people don't understand that about Dan.
I heard he's shy in public. Yeah.
He doesn't like to be in conversations he can't control. I've heard numerous things about this. And he only wants to dominate things because he's afraid if he doesn't. He came out on the field one preseason game, I think it was, to make some announcement at halftime, honoring somebody, I forget. And they booed him off the field in the early days. And he never came back after that. He's too afraid of those kind of conversations. He won't speak to a media person that's not on, a partner, organization or whatever. Because he doesn't want to answer real questions, because even if you get away from the controversies at times, there's a lot of questions I would have loved to have asked over the years about the stadium and things like that. Too afraid. So, he's just kind of this, the guy who wants to always be the bully and be everything, and he's just not. He couldn't pull it off.
Gotcha. Doug, you got anything? Want to ask questions?
I was just because Chick Hernandez was on the podcast last week and had said he thought he was the last guy to have interviewed Snyder, and that was back when Chick was on TV. So date that how you will, but it's been a little while, and I'm not saying that's gospel. It just is saying he doesn't give out very many interviews, and he hates doing it for sure.
That's a tough way to live, right? Yeah. Sorry, Rick.
And Tom,
It should be fun owning an NFL team, right?
Yeah, it should be fun times.
It should be
interact
fun
with
owning the
fans and
NFL team you're
media.
rooting for.
well, and there's
it can't be fun right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of NFL owners that don't really speak to the media much. Once in a blue moon, but I mean, it's been years since I've been able to ask Dan a straight question about anything, and we weren't friendly to each other, and there would be words that would be said, and I used to bug him because he'd get in his limo in front of the park, so I'd slide between the door and him in the car. They couldn't close the door, and so I'd keep hitting him with questions that drove him nuts, and so they banned us from the front of the door, all that kind of thing.
That's some good stuff, Rick. That's some good journalism integrity. I like that. Go for it. It's good.
Tanya's not really talked to anybody either. We thought maybe she'd say something, but she hasn't either, and she hates the media because we're mean. So, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm just glad this is going to be finally over. Whoever gets it, I'm not sure yet, but it's got to be better than this. I mean, I don't think Jeff Bezos is going to be handling my calls every day.
I'm curious about that too. I'm going to ask you about him in a moment. Rick, do you see any parallels between the previous sale and this one right now? Because I know you were around for the when Jack Cook passed the torch to Mr. Snyder. Is there any parallels that you're noticing so far? Is it a completely different situation, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's kind of going to script. I've been able to see a lot of the same stuff, including the craziness that's going on now. I mean, I told people from the start it wasn't going to happen by the owners' meetings in March, and Snyder would try and pull out at some point. All these things were scripted. You could see it. It happened a lot like that. People really don't change. The years go by, but people really don't change much. And I've been doing this 45 years, so I kind of know what people are going to do, by and large. That's one of the advantages of getting old, is you get to eat things. It's about the only advantage you're getting.
There's only a couple there, Rick.
Yeah, no, man. Yeah, maybe I get to semi-retire at some point, but it's just kind of going as it is. I covered the other stadium chase, and that was a wild one too, and that was a lot of fun too, because there was so much yelling at each other about so many different things, and it's kind of went that way again with the stadium chase. They went from Maryland, Virginia to DC, and it bounced around, and everybody, when Virginia offered $1 billion to go to Dumfries, I kind of thought, what are you people, insane?
They don't want you to call it Dumfries anymore, Rick.
What do you call it?
It's like Potomac Shores, I think.
It is.
They classed it up a little bit. No more Dumfries, Rick. You can't do that.
Huh. Well, I mean, that's like City Center in D.C. Nobody calls it City Center except for the people that own it, and they don't pay me to call it that. So, when FedEx Field got the name, I remember the PR guy, John Maroon, came to press box and said, FedEx Field is one word. I said, no, it's not. It's 2 words. He goes, no, it's 1 word. We made it 1 word. I said, you don't get to control the English language. It's 2 words. So all their releases say 1 word, and all my stories say 2.
I love the defiance. That's great, Rick.
Or Cook wanted to do Raljon. We laughed that one out of the room too.
Yeah, I remember Raljon, actually. I do remember that. Big picture, Rick, what do you think is more likely to happen? Do you think Dan Snyder is going to sell the team, or do you think it's going to potentially go to the hands of the NFL owners and potentially have a vote out in that regard? Which one do you think is more likely to happen?
The NFL owners meet March 26th to 29th, and Snyder's on the agenda.
That's all.
Wouldn't surprise me if the sale deal is made on the 25th, day before.
That makes sense.
Deadlines create actions, and I think this one will be the one that does it. This thing about Jeff Bezos is banned from bidding. What a bunch of BS that is. I mean, you can always. Snyder doesn't have to take the bid. It's up to him, but he can't ban someone from offering. I don't know. I mean, I think he's using it as leverage too against Josh Harris to say, "Hey, Josh, I really want to screw Bezos, but you got to come up a little bit, man. Give me another $100 million or something." I could see him doing that. I'd do it. If I'm just getting ready to sell my own home. I'll play any game I can. So Snyder, I could see him doing that to Harris, but I don't know if Harris is a smart guy, owns other sports teams and knows how to develop things, which is important. Bezos is the only guy who can get RFK, and Fertitta, Fertitta would make it a classier experience for fans, but it's going to cost you. And as I often say, when we talk about that new stadium, the word of the day is PSLs.
I know. It's gonna be a big deal.
We talked about that last time you were on the show. I really did not fully comprehend what the PSLs are.
It's a big deal. It's gonna be a big. So I'm a season ticket holder. So it's gonna be a huge detriment to me potentially buying a ticket to the next stadium.
Real quick, Rick, do you think they'll
good.
have to fix the 30% before we move off this? Do you think they'll have to fix the 30% threshold because it only allows but like 4 or 5 people every single time? Like Dan's got to be upset that I mean, you can't bid against yourself if there's only like 3 people, right? So would it behoove the NFL to relax? Because I don't think the NBA does that for their franchise sales. I don't think MLB or hockey does that. I think this 30% threshold is simply for the NFL, and it so limits who can buy these things.
Well, it kind of goes back to Milstein's bid in a way that failed because Milstein, they wanted 30%. Milstein was a big real estate guy in New York. I mean, he had the money, but it was in things he didn't think he had to put it down. Like, in real estate, you don't have to. Right. And he went all the way to the very end where they said, we're voting 31-0 today to reject your bid unless you want to withdraw it. I mean, that's how far it went. But maybe they drop it a little, but the NFL's greatest fear is for somebody new to come in and then default. Like Milstein would have all that money in real estate. Suppose the market goes down and he can't cover his call. Suddenly, a Bank of America owns a team. That's the last, because then the league doesn't get to pick its next owner, and they're very protective of that. Right. That scares them a lot. So that's why they're holding fast to that kind of thing. But you only need 2 people for a bidding war.
Person who buys a team?
I'm a big fan of Tillman Fertitta. I'll say that. I know a lot of people aren't. They go, oh, he's this, that. I don't know, a billionaire. It's not a jerk. I mean, you don't get to be a billionaire being a nice guy. But
why do you like him? Touch on that. I don't really know much about him, to be honest with you.
You've been high on him this episode for sure.
Yeah, he had a show called Billionaire Buyer on CNBC a few years ago, where he worked with young companies to be suppliers to his major chain. Like he owns Landry's, which is a big thing. He owns Forrest Gump, McCormick and Schmidt. He owns
like seafood restaurants. Yeah.
In like 15 countries or something. So he can really make or break a company by, doing it. And he would teach people things. One of the superpowers you have to have as a newspaper guy is you have to size up people quickly and you have to look around corners. That's the 2 things you got to do if you don't want to look stupid or if you're not just sitting there writing a game story every day. And I could see a guy I think is a good guy, and he obviously is very successful. I think he could treat people well overall. Josh Harris, I think, be interesting to have a Commanders owner who owns the 76ers and the Devils.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. He lives in New York as well, so I don't know how attached and invested
he
is
on the team. But I think he grew up a Commanders fan, if I'm not mistaken. He's from the area, right? No,
he went to a private school in D.C., right, Rick? I think that's where he went.
Yeah. But I mean, suppose the Devils are playing the Caps for a must-win, and he's sitting over there rooting for the Devils. I mean, that's just weird for fans.
It's like John Wall in his Cowboys jersey.
Yeah, very much. I mean, when Bryce Harper was wearing a Vegas Knights jersey and everybody hated that, I can see that being a problem. But he's very smart. Harris seems like a decent guy too. He knows how to do developing, and that's going to be so important if you want to try and get the RFK, because you can do the RFK site, but the city says we want everybody to get rich off this. Where Dan Snyder just said, mine. And Bezos, the city greatly wants grocery stores. Well, Jeff Bezos owns Whole Foods. I mean, we'll just put a bunch of those. Right. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why Bezos could do a lot of political things. Like this land is federally owned. Okay, Bezos can go buy a mountain and swap it. Developers do that all the time. I'll give you the mountain out there and you can have this. And then you could give it over to the D.C. government and work with them. And, some of the parking lots would be gone for other things. It's not just about tailgating, I'm sorry, it's just not. They even have a place to put a second metro stop at RFK. Just to the left of it. It'd be above ground, because if you're going to ask 60,000 people to come with little tailgating, you got to have a second metro line, which they would. So Bezos can do these things, and that's where everybody, all the high tide raises all boats kind of thing. And that's what DC wants. So it can still happen. You notice DC haven't knocked down the stadium yet. They've been waiting. I mean, it's going to come down pretty soon. I think in the next few months. I was reading they had to get rid of all the asbestos by hand. They couldn't just blow it up, put a toxic cloud over the city. We all die of cancer in 5 years. That's why they didn't just do that. but they had to go in there by hand, basically. But so I don't know. I'm kind of willing. I don't really care in the end. You can take whoever you want, but I think they have 3 good candidates. And the Milwaukee Bucks owner yesterday sold his share of the team, and he's talking about that coming. That's a new one on me to know who he is.
He said he was not interested, but the timing is unusual.
Yeah. So we'll see.
And then, Rick, besides DC, I know you have a pretty good grasp of the city. Is there any potential land other than RFK that they could potentially build in the city, or not really, right?
Not really. I mean, it's gone. I mean, when they did the last stadium, moving around, besides RFK, they had where now is the Nationals Park. Audi Field could have been maybe a smaller version, could have maybe worked. New York Avenue had a spot that's now a major government hub by George Avenue. These things are all gone. So, DC has resurrected itself since 9/11. We had 1 out of 5 people who live in DC. I'm sorry, 1 out of 20 people who live in DC, 5%, are New Yorkers who came down after 9/11. The city has grown 300,000 people since 9/11.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
No new roads, but so there isn't any room anymore. The developers have just gone in. You've seen the cranes over the cities. There's some room in Anacostia. Maybe you could go across the Anacostia River from RFK.
That's what I heard.
I think I saw that. Yeah,
that's the only spot that maybe works on there, because Anacostia is undergoing a renaissance too. I happen to be an Anacostia native, believe it or not. Way back then. So I'm one of Mayor Barry's boys. Then my whole family used to live over there. And of course, things have changed so much. That was a long time ago. But maybe that's a spot. And that's also federally controlled.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
The federal government owns 1/4 of the city.
Okay.
Overall. So it's not just a national mall. They own stuff everywhere that you go. It's such a pain. Just like Oxon Cove down by the Wilson Bridge. Federally owned. So, man, don't they own in the city?
Yeah.
That's why they have such control of it, because we are a district here. And
I was going to say, does it make it easier if they just give you statehood there?
Yeah, because then at least the mayor would be a governor and could decide things a little more directly. And the federal government doesn't seem to move much. I mean, when Jack Kent Cooke decided to go to Landover, first he was going to go to Laurel. All right, so he loses the Virginia thing. And he was going to go to Capitol Hill. And the politicians basically said, put some chapstick on because you're going to kiss a lot of butts before we give this to you. All right. So he said, screw you, and went to Laurel. And then that didn't work because he was just over the Anne Arundel County line, and the governor then was Paris Glendenning, who said, you're too close to Baltimore. If you move down the street to Route 1, you're in PG County, my home district, and then that's okay. Yeah, he was talking about a mile, politician. That would have been a disaster for traffic to have moved over there. So then he went to Landover. It's a dairy farm, and he bought it. It's just crazy like how it goes there, but it was quite the adventure. I was there when Sharon Pratt Kelly called him the billionaire bully. That was a lot of fun. Cook was a lot of fun to cover. A scary guy at times, but he was fun.
There you go. Do you have a preference on National Harbor or FedEx 2.0, renovating that by any chance? How do you feel about all that?
Man, National Harbor would be a good spot.
I think so too.
By the Wilson Bridge, they could run the metro over from Eisenhower Avenue. So it could be on a metro line. That's why Wilson Bridge has that big gaps on the left, the inside lane. There's a big opening. That's for the metro one day to cross over the bridge.
Okay.
So that could go. You could be near the entertainment complex at MGM if you're into that. There's a lot going there versus Landover. I mean, the state of Maryland has said we're going to add $300 million to redevelop Landover. Okay, I'm 62 years old. I've never seen the day that Landover thrived. I mean, it's
true.
It's just been hard. I mean, Ted Lerner owned Landover Mall. That's all dust.
I remember that.
I don't blame the state for saying let's try and do it there. And Suitland is the other area the state wants to try and develop, and stadium would help. But the problem with Landover, if you build a new stadium, Landover is not a flat little thing. It's a big hill up and down. And so, pedestrian traffic and all would not just be casually walking amongst it all like it can in a better terrain. So I don't know.
Get your workout on.
Just steps in.
So I think it's going to be, if they put the new stadium, I think it's near the metro side they're talking about. So that's even further away from Landover in a way to walk it. Anybody that's walked the metro to the stadium, it's about a mile. It's an easier walk, but it's still a walk. I mean, people used to walk from the old Cap Center across the highway, bridges.
Yeah.
So I just think Oxen Cove would be better, but I just don't see it happening in the end.
Cool. Doug, you got anything?
No, just I just was thinking as you mentioned that about putting it over there in the harbor with all the extra stuff. I do find it interesting that they just put the FanDuel casino or sports book, however you want to call it, inside FedEx, kind of, I guess, as a way to show people, hey, we don't have to be next to a casino. We'll just do it here. I know a sports book is different than an actual full-blown casino with table games, but I do think it's interesting that they at least showed they could be in that market somehow. And
the interesting part of that sports book is you can't bet on NFL games during Commanders games.
I know. I heard about that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's there.
It's
like going to the Superdome in Atlanta. That's like Falcons game on Sundays without being able to get Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
They're not open on Sundays.
Rick, I got one or two more questions for you. I can let you go. So going back to Bezos, what's your thoughts on him? Do you think he actually is potentially going to bid on the team? Do you think the NFL would welcome him, or would they be intimidated by his wealth? How do you feel about that?
No, they would love him because he would pay even more. So everybody's franchise just went up $1 billion in price. So they love that because he'll outbid them. Obviously he's got that Thursday night game, so Commanders could play every Thursday night. I'd like my Sundays free. That'd be great. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be something.
Yeah, like Virginia Tech football used to play on Thursday nights.
And there's no conflict of interest there, Rick. I know we talked to AJ Perez a little bit about would he have to get rid of that? It feels odd, but apparently that's not the deal, right? He can still, because he doesn't own Amazon anymore.
Right. Although he's the I don't know, is he the CEO or whatever they call it now? He took a different thing, but I don't think so. I mean, so he has the TV network. The NFL decides the schedule, so he doesn't. I mean, otherwise, like I said, we'd have Commanders games Thursday nights. How awesome would that be? Then we could have free Sundays for my first time in my life. That'd be awesome. I just think I think they would like Bezos because he could do a lot of things that no one else can do. Being the world's richest man and owning Amazon. I mean, I don't think I bought anything from people outside of Amazon in several years. They just bring it to my house. It's great. So I think he would be their first choice. And if it doesn't happen here, he could go to Seattle. And
I was going to say, Rick, there's a couple of franchises coming up for sale in the next couple of years, right? They're talking about the Chargers, definitely the Seahawks. What's the chance he just says, I'm not into all this nonsense. I'll wait.
I could see it. I could see that very much. That's why I don't think he's one of these slam dunk things that people always say. Right. And if that happens, then you got Harris versus Fertitta. I don't know. That'd be interesting to see which one of them wins. It's not always about the absolute last dollar. And some of this also is what I don't know is, okay, you're going to sell the Commanders. Are you going to sell the Ashburn facility? Are you going to sell the stadium with it? Because the next guy might say, listen, I don't need that old junk. I'll rent it from you for a few years. And then while I'm building my own. But those things are very valuable. There's much land in Landover. There's a lot of land in Ashburn where they have all these monoliths of servers. I mean, Lincoln Park has several big buildings around them because like 2/3 of the world's traffic goes through the internet servers there. It's something crazy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's huge.
In Ashburn, right?
Yeah. So that's all worthwhile. I mean, there's 4 of those buildings right next to them. And then who's got the sports betting license? Is that Dan Snyder's? Those 3 things could be $1 billion on the price.
Is it Snyder or is it Commanders LLC? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that works on there. It's all new. And if I'm Dan Snyder, I say, when George Preston Marshall sold the team to Jack Kent Cooke, he made Cooke buy his 2 homes in D.C. as part of the deal. So you want to sell a $50 million Potomac mansion? Throw it on the table too. What's that to this deal?
Right. And then, Rick, I don't know if you're allowed to say this or kind of touch on this, but obviously Bezos owns the Washington Post. Through your connections, what do you know about Jeff Bezos as a potential owner of a large organization? Is he pretty hands off? Is he hands on? We hear that negative of like Amazon. He like really is tough on his workers in that regard. I'm just curious about the Washington Post.
Well, as somebody who got laid off by Jeff Bezos at the Post.
Okay. All right.
And when 8 hours notice, I was at Redskin Park. I see
Okay.
I'm walking down to the locker room middle of like Thursday, and I see my boss has tweeted, "Hey, it's been great." And so I call her and say, "Where are you going?" She goes, "Oh, you're going too.
Oh, geez.
We got 8 hours.
Omnious. Okay.
I mean, we were laid off with 8 hours notice, and so so it was part of the extra edition they had Express. So I've been one of his boys who's been cut, but by and large, people over there tell me that he's very much been hands off, except last fall he kind of came back to them and said, "We got to cut payrolls and stuff. The kids page, the Sunday magazine, these kind of things people aren't really watching, reading anymore. We'll get rid of them." And it's an evolution of the business. They're not the only ones. And that was where he stepped in and said, "We got to do some of this." But otherwise, with editorial coverage, no, he's not involved. I mean, I worked at the Washington Times 20 years. Reverend Sun Young Moon owned it. I never met the dude. I mean, it's not like he said Redskin coverage needs this. I mean, people exaggerate the role of owners in the news business itself.
That's what I figured. I got one more question, unless you have one, Doug. Do you have any questions right now? Or are you good?
I was just going to ask Rick who replaced him at the Post.
Well, at the Post, they closed the whole edition I work for, so nobody replaced me.
Okay.
I'm irreplaceable. That's how it works.
100%.
Thought I'd get you to take the cheese. Nice job.
Yeah, at the Times, they've had a series of guys try and be me. And Matthew Paris is doing a great job. There's a lot of really good reporters.
There are some good
covering this team. They get bashed a lot by the public, but Keim and Standick and Paris and JP
Nikki Javala is awesome too. She's really good. Yeah.
So these are all top notch. You don't just get your journalism card and walk out the Redskin Park. And they're younger today than they used to be. I was 32 when I really became a main guy. I was out there some in my 20s. I was out there to help out as the punk kid that had hair and everything. I mean, Doug Williams said, "I don't remember you." I said, "I had hair then, Doug." I mean, the years haven't been kind. But, I just be one of those punk kids. But there's a lot of really good talent out there covering. People should be happy about that. These are good, solid reporters.
I agree. And it would be remiss if I don't ask at least one football question before we're done, Rick. How do you feel about Sam Howell as the quarterback for Washington? Do you think there's going to be a deal for Daron Payne or Cam Curl? How do you feel about that? Have you heard anything in your regard?
Last year, Sam Howell's first day at rookie camp, I talked about, wow, this kid really.
Okay.
I spotted him right there. I spot ballers. The thing I loved about Eric Bieniemy when he said the other day was, "I don't care about analytics. I care about ballers." I was like, yes. There's the right answer. Not many people do that anymore. And I think Hal has the arm. He's really a better version of Heineke. He's got mobility. He's got a better arm. Smart. He's not afraid. And I saw a lot of really good things in the offseason and preseason about him. And I think if you can block for him, it'd be nice to get a few linemen. He'll be fine. Is he a Kilmer or something like that? Throws a better ball than Billy, but he could be, just as good. I mean, Billy won 51 games, so it wasn't like he stunk. So I like Sam Howell a lot. I think he'll be fine if they just don't screw it up, that kind of thing. They need a tight end to catch some balls, that kind of thing. But you got receivers, you got running backs. So you just offensive line starts with everything. Your lines are always everything. Curl and Forest, I wanted to make the nickname Dark Forest. Don't go near there, but
that's pretty cool.
Didn't catch on, but those are nice players too. The drafts have been okay the last few years. They've been better than people give them credit. I saw some big group rated their draft like, I don't know, it was a D or something last year. And I thought, no. You got several good players. If you can get 3 good players, that's a good draft.
I agree. Are you a Rivera guy, Rick? Last question. Are you Rivera? Do you like Ron Rivera?
I respect Ron very much as a person. I always say I think Ron was the right person to hire, and maybe now the right time to go. And both things can be true. He helped this organization in a very chaotic time, pull together so many things and brought in a man of integrity there and all that. Coaching wise, sometimes I kind of wonder about things, like everybody does, the timeouts, the challenges, things like that. And, sometimes he says things just to say them, to back his boys, you have to. You can't sit there and throw them out to the wolves. I get that, but I know it's not true what he's thinking at times. But every coach does that. I'd like, in a way, to see him ascend to like a team presidency, and not Jason Wright's job. That's business side. Be the football oversight guy, but does he pick the right coach after him? Because I think they need a new coach. I think they need a good young blood. I mean, you want to get your McVay, somebody like that, And who's picking that? Because Dan Snyder sure wasn't picking that. He didn't know who anybody was. And if you looked at Dan's total history of hiring coaches, he has done exactly the same thing every time. Went from a guy that was a hard case to an easy guy to a hard easy.
He's tried it all.
Every single time. Ron's the hard case guy kind of thing. The adult in the room. So the next guy, I don't know who that be, somebody loosey-goosey, I guess. But, things like Jim Zorn, that was so ridiculous.
That was crazy.
What happened there? They wanted one of the Super Bowl assistants, and the guys turned them down. Then they were stuck with nothing. That's what happened there. They weren't prepared for Gibbs to leave when people like me could see it coming the whole way after Sean Taylor's death. And listening to Joe, I thought Joe did such a great job after Sean died of pulling that organization together, getting them to the playoffs. But every day after practice, he's talking about, heaven and Sean and 1,000-year games and just stuff you could listen to. I could forever. He did such a good job there. But you also knew his grandson had leukemia in North Carolina, and he wanted to go and be there so badly. So we all knew that he was going to leave. And yet Dan Snyder had no idea. So that cost him a couple of years of chaos there. And Jim Zorn was a nice man, had no business being head coach. And they were making it so hard for him, they wanted him to quit. So Dan would have to pay him the money. And I told Jim, I said, don't let them take your money from you. This is generational money.
It's true.
You deserve it. You took the job, they offered. It's not your fault who you are. And when they brought in the bingo caller and all that nonsense, and, they did all kind of demeaning things to him personally. Yeah. And, Vinny Serrato made a hit on him. And that's the kind of stuff Snyder did. It was just nasty. And he got caught in there. So who's going to pick the next coach? I don't know. And we'll see if what the new owner thinks. Maybe they think because they took chemistry class in high school, they can run Dow Chemical. Well, we'll see what happens here. Are they going to stay out of the way, or do they suddenly have an opinion? Snyder always wanted quarterbacks because he wanted somebody he could market. There was a time when they wanted a guard really badly. And he said, I am not standing next to a guard on that stage because the guy would be a foot taller. And Snyder was getting an arena football team once, and the guy who was the head of the arena league was something like 6'7", 350. This guy was enormous. And Dan looked like a doll next to him. And that's why Dan wouldn't pick that guard the next year. He didn't want to look like a doll next to him. That's the craziness that goes in.
It's wild. All right, Doug, any last minute questions for Rick? Are you good?
No, I was just going to say I completely agree with you on Ron Rivera. I would much prefer him to be the head of football ops than the football coach. That's all. I couldn't agree more.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time. Rick, tell everyone that's listening where they can find you on social media, what kind of projects you're working on, and, what are you up to?
So Rick Snider's Washington is on YouTube. We just passed my 11.5 million viewer between social media and Twitter. Rick Snider's Washington on Twitter. So I'm always writing something, whatever. And then I got tours. I do tour guiding, monumentalthoughts.com. I have walking tours. They don't cost much. You can do different things like, City of Alexandria. I'm having a new tour this year. Lincoln's assassination because I'm related to John Wilkes Booth. So it's a family story on there. And that's kind of stories I do. Embassy Road. So, tourism's coming back this year. Thank God. And I don't know. I always have something. I teach history online to kids. I mean, it's stuff like that.
Rick, did they announce the cherry blossom date?
They came out yesterday and said
like late March, right?
And yeah. I think they're wrong. I think it'll be earlier. I think it'll be about 17th, 18th, because it's going to get cool next week. That's going to slow it down. But I tell people the Magnolias in D.C. is what you want to go see. And you can start this weekend, really. I was at the Smithsonian Castle, and the Magnolias are magnificent. I think they're better than cherry blossoms. I mean, cherry blossoms are cool if you're underneath the trees right in it. But the Magnolias are awesome. Go by the Smithsonian this weekend and see them, because they're usually a couple weeks ahead.
And you can smell them from like a mile away, right, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, Smithsonian
that's the beautiful thing about those Magnolias.
Yeah, I mean, really, you can walk from the Magnolias to the out part of the cherry blossoms in about 3 blocks.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's right by the Smithsonian Metro exit, too. You can see it. You can't miss the castle, there.
100%. I'm actually going to run the Cherry Blossom 10K on March 12th. It'd be kind of cool if they're out there. So
nice.
Fun to see.
For you, George.
When I ran it, it was the Cherry Blossom 10 miler, not some sissy 10K.
All right, sorry, Rick. I'm working to get to you, man. I'm trying to get there.
George is all European. Got all European on us.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I did it. I did it very slowly, but I was trying to run a marathon, and I did the Cherry Blossom 10 mile. I could find the badge and prove it, but it was slow. Dogs were running by me at the end or something. I don't know. I took up the end.
That's funny.
Like 10.
I'm right there with you. It's all about completion, not speed. And then, Doug, what about you, man? Where can they find the social media? What are you working on?
The Big Douglas Show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do shows. We're doing a draft prep on Wednesday now, and inside the command center on Fridays for the commanders. And who knows what happens on Mondays.
Exactly right. And guys, I'm George Carmi. You can find me at gcarmi21, host of the Command the Mic podcast. It was a blessing to have Rick and Doug on here. Have a great evening, guys. Take care. See you guys later.